Let's now bring in Eugene Kontorovich, a law professor at Northwestern University. Eugene, thanks for being with us. And Eugene, you were part of that hearing today advocating for the U.S. to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Now, from an international law perspective, you maintain that Israel does have a lawful claim to the Golan Heights as it was captured after Syria attacked Israel back in 1967 during that six-day war. So explain that, elaborate on that legal claim.
There's a basic principle in international law which is based on the UN Charter. The UN Charter says you're not allowed to use aggression against other countries. You're not allowed to attack other countries. And since you're not allowed to use aggression against other countries, in a war of aggression, you can't keep any territory that you happen to take. However, the UN Charter doesn't ban all uses of force. It says there's an inherent right to self-defense. A war of self-defense is lawful. And if the underlying use of force is lawful, territory taken in such a conflict could be subject to conquest. Indeed, if it were not, it would be a license to attack other countries because you know you would just break even.
All right. That will take some convincing with the United Nations, though it is a compelling legal argument. But let's say the U.S. does go ahead and recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. What does that accomplish if the rest of the world doesn't agree with the U.S.?
First of all, the rest of the world is likely to follow a U.S. position. We see just in the few months after the U.S. moved its embassy to Jerusalem, several other countries have followed suit. Even European countries are beginning to open up diplomatic missions in Jerusalem. And America is not just one country out of 193. It is the gorilla in the room, and it has extraordinary gravitational force. It also says to Iran, and it says to the Assad regime, don't try to take this territory back. Don't use this as a pretext, because Israel's rights here are being endorsed and backed by the most powerful country in the world.
Yeah, it does send a strong signal. Do you see Russia then going along with this as well?
Russia is motivated not by deep principles, but by its momentary interests. And whether Russia goes along is really a function of what it means in the bigger picture, what Assad's general situation is. But I don't see Russia as being a deal breaker here, nor are the Arab countries who would traditionally oppose this deal breakers, because Assad is now essentially an Iranian puppet state. The Syrian regime is an Iranian puppet, and most of the Sunni Arab states feel no common cause with Syria and would be happy for any diplomatic moves which weaken Assad.
Well, there is the argument that this move would anger other Arab countries and destabilize relations between them and the U.S. How do you counter that argument? I
think the Arab countries anything that is bad for Assad is good for Jordan and Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And even if they don't publicly celebrate, they would be quite satisfied with this outcome. We saw that all the foreign policy experts predicted massive Arab unrest, attacks on U.S. countries around the Arab world after moving the embassy to Jerusalem. None of that happened. And the Golan Heights, the Syrian Golan Heights, is something the Arab states care about about 1 million times less than Jerusalem.
So, Eugene, in all of this, how likely do you think that this U.S. recognition could happen?
I think you never know what's going to happen, and the move of the embassy to Jerusalem was, in a sense, quite unexpected and happened faster than anyone expected. I'd like to point out that Congress passed the law calling for the embassy to be moved to Jerusalem more than 20 years ago, and it took over 2 decades for that intention to be realized. So certainly one might think that after 70 years of control of the Golan, America could recognize Israeli sovereignty, but I think it could happen much quicker, and it could happen even in coming years.
All right. Well, the process has been started. Eugene, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.